Good evening, welcome. Our attention is on the standoff at the Senate that has metastasized into what appears to be what activists are calling police being misused and used to protect a clique of political elite. And there are concerns from Kenyans that the executive is keen on rolling back on the democratic gains in the first instance, that is the multi-party democracy in 1992, and then following the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. In that aspect, I take the account of Professor Hezron Mogambi, who is political commentator, governance analyst, and lectures at the University of Nairobi here in the Kenyan capital. And from Iceland in Europe, we are joined by David Kimengere, who is the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Voters Privileges Rights Association and commentates on topical development that regard Kenyans in the diaspora and equally commentates on development here at home. Gentlemen, your time is appreciated. First to you, Professor Hezron Mogambi. Looking at what transpired on Monday, following the arrest of the three senators, Bomet, Samburu, and the county of Kakamega, does this erode, in your view, the very foundations of the 2010 Constitution?
Thank you very much, Ayub. Always a pleasure to be with you, as usual, on this program. Straight to the point, this act and many other acts clearly negate the spirit and letter of the Constitution 2010. All Kenyans know very well that before that, and in some years back, Kenya had very things which could not really count Kenya as part of the map of the democratic spaces and democratic countries in the world. And that is why the Constitution 2010 has been hailed as one of those that is progressive in terms of ensuring that people's rights, governance systems are actually adhered to, and everybody enjoys the protection of those rights. And actually those agencies, like the Kenya police, like the police force, are supposed to implement, are supposed to ensure that Kenyans enjoy their rights as enshrined in the Constitution, in both the spirit and the letter. But with such acts, then one starts fearing that even with the Constitution 2010, we are 9-10 years into the implementation of the Constitution, we are now retrogressively going back to those so-called dark days.
Okay, Professor, in large extent, we will be expounding on the 10 years since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution on the 27th of August, 2010. We are now some 7 days away from that and what it means for the country going forward amid talks of changing the Constitution. David, to you in Iceland, what does this portend for Kenya's democracy owing to the shortfall that we have experienced in the implementation, say, for instance, of the Waki Commission report in 2007-8 to look into the post-election skirmishes that engulfed the country? And does it again perhaps amplify the calls for proper police reforms?
I think the problem now we are seeing back to my country is making us, whenever we are, to be afraid. And before I start, can I say hi to everyone in Kenya, all those who are watching this? And the problem we are seeing is this, having the Constitution and the clause where they were saying that the 80% was okay. I think now they are using the loophole. Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, I get you. There seems to be a communication audio problem, but we'll be getting back to you as you set up probably with the, of course, as we straighten the communication channel and the glitch we are experiencing, and we'll be getting back to you, David, in time. Professor Hezron Mogambi, to you on the same question. When you look at what happened on Monday, clearly what appeared to have been a violation of rights of the three senators, and the senator, for instance, Kakamega County, Cleophas Malala, who was released after even 800-kilometer journey from Nairobi to Kakamega, and where the police said there were no charges, literally. I mean, does this perhaps amplify the call for proper police reforms in Kenya?
of course, the answer to your question is yes. But the other question which will follow that is, have we been having police reforms in Kenya, even then, since the Constitution 2010 came into effect? I will tell you, the police force or the police service has used thousands and millions of shillings in trying to reform the force. And one of those very clear physical points to show you that there have been attempts to do that is even the change of the uniform itself. In fact, I'm told even the curriculum in their training colleges, both at Embakasi, in Kiganjo, and elsewhere, has also changed to ensure that there are elements of human rights, there are elements of the way they are supposed to handle people, there are elements of humanity, there are elements of values in their operations, in the day-to-day operations, and how they work with the Kenyans, to ensure everything is right. Remember, one of those changes also was in their housing schemes. It was said, you remember, if you remember, that they should leave. Actually, they were pushed out of their housing, which was most of them were staying in the police quarters.
Okay.
And some of them had been housed using government money.
Okay.
And recently, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were all told that they will be given some allowance so that they can live with the people. Why? Because that was one of the reform measures to ensure that they also live with the people, they understand how the people live, they work together, because they're also Kenyans, like us. They are brothers and sisters. And so I think the issue here is, are you not about reforms? The issue here is, how do we make police independent in the sense in which they will serve in accordance to the Constitution and principles as enshrined in the Police Act.
All right, Professor, before I go to David, who I understand, my director, we have managed to redress the problem in our communication channel. Then when you look at the existing goodwill, is it present or absent? And what does it say about the government's encroaching of the independence as given by the Constitution and clearly enshrined, when the same government today did clearly amend the Security Laws Act, which was acrimoniously passed in 2014 December after the ruling Jubilee Party bulldozed it, despite, of course, the opposition decry? Is it a case of an encroachment on an independent guaranteed because the president today has the prerogative to appoint the Inspector General of Police without open recruitment?
In the spirit of the law, of course, that is clearly an infringement and an encroachment of that independence, which I have said that it is important because they cannot operate without that independence. Once the Inspector General and the deputies know that they work at the whims of a politician who may be the president or who may actually be the CS for internal security, then the issue of independence then disappears. And that explains why, the reason as why people now feel that without that independence, then the IG, the Inspector General of Police, works at the whim of other quarters, politicians, so to speak. And that is why, although they may be disciplined, although they may have gone through their ethics in training and know what to do, they are then forced to do what they know themselves is not right. And it actually falls back very badly on the image of the force, because in the end, when people are arrested at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., and they are not charged because the DPP cannot see why he should charge those people, then clearly it shows that we have reformed 2 steps forward and 4 steps backward.
Okay, David Kimengere, to you then, and that clearly does bring, isn't it, the underpinning factor, which in this case is playing out in the open, and that is the disconnect in the criminal justice system. The DCI does arrest, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions does say that we have no grounds for the prosecution of these 2 gentlemen, the 3 senators I'm talking about. Then it brings out the need for comprehensive, isn't it, perhaps policies that need to address the shortfall in the policing sector in the country?
Thank you very much for the great question. But from my understanding or how I see the things are, there is a problem on salary. You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please. I'm getting you.
Yeah, if police will never be given good salaries, and then they are the people who are given to implement the laws, I think that's where the big gap is. Because even if you change the color, you change whatever, but you still give them a peasant, that will never encourage them to have the better morale. I think it is high time now our government to look the salary of this great civil servant who are supposed to check on our security, who are supposed to implement laws which are made. And I have said before, or I must make it clear here, if the maker of laws make the unjust law, and the judges or the implementers of law follow the laws, that laws to me is justice. But the problem here, it is high time our government look the salaries of this civil servant. And I think that's where the problem is. How can you rely on police to go and pursue the corrupt people who have stolen billions, and the people who are following that, they are paid 20,000 or less? Do you think it will ever materialize? I think that's where the problem is, in my perspective.
Okay, despite mentioning then the welfare aspect here, which is very key and critical and sits pretty much at the epicenter of what we're discussing at the moment, in your view then, is there the goodwill perhaps to redress, to recourse, to right the problems that we have been experiencing with the policing service in the country, from the Waki Commission, the sort of low appetite at the time shown by the late Interior Minister, Professor George Saitoti, and up to now where we seem to be seeing an executive exogenous pressure on police to target people whom they believe have different political opinion?
And that's where the problem comes, because always the political class will use police. And because tomorrow we are now heading to the next general election, and the new executive, when they come into power, I think they will take the same leverage to settle the goals for the former government. That's why we are I am saying, or I'm in observation, that things must be made clear now. The best law must be made, and everybody must feel that they must participate. And that's why I look at it this way. If always the laws will be from one-sided and the police are not informed, it will never materialize. We have the best research from work report, as you have said, from Kiriga report, from TJRC, but they are all gathering dust. Who is coming to implement this, if not the current government?
Okay, and if not the current government, definitely the other governments that will come, given the mandate and the authority given by the Kenyan people under Article 1 of the Constitution, that is the sovereign power which belongs to the people of the Republic of Kenya. David, from you to Professor Hezron Mugambi. Prof, we have seen what has transpired at the moment, apparently, a case of now the chickens coming home to roost for the ruling Jubilee Party because they did support wholesomely the amendment of the security laws in December 2014, despite local and international outcry. And today the shoe is on the other end when you see Murkomen decrying the government state high-handedness. In your view then, isn't this perhaps a cause of political miscalculation and the lack of existing goodwill at the time? And how do we make laws for posterity, and how does the political class need to understand that?
You know, I have always argued that our leadership and everywhere in the world should make laws for posterity. Today you are an MP, tomorrow you are not an MP. Today you are in leadership as president, as senator, as AG, IG. The next day you are not. And therefore people should be able to account for their actions. That is why there is always a hue and cry as to whether Senate and the National Assembly are actually making laws for their own selfish interest or for the posterity of this country. And that is why now you find it very interesting, in fact, that the same people who are fighting to ensure the amendment bill passes, the security bill passes, are the same people who find themselves on the wrong footing of the same act which they were fighting to pass. And I think that should be a lesson. Enough. We don't need more lessons than this, that when our lawmakers in parliament, they should consider country first than anyone else. Because today they are MPs or senators, tomorrow they are not. And those same laws which they make could as well be used the next day or after 5 years against them. And if this does not serve as a lesson to them, I don't know what else can actually serve.
Okay, now given what's happening at the moment and the mentioning of the Waki report that you have cited and I earlier on cited, which was very key and formed post-election skirmishes of 2007-8, herein again lies the other dilemma, isn't it, Prof, when it clearly is an illustration of the breakup or the disconnect between the criminal justice system agencies when the DPP says there's no sufficient ground for the prosecution of the people arrested. The DCI does arrest because you seem to be having or experiencing a form of pressure from the executive. How do we even, talk about independence when there seems to be an ending sort of encroachment by the executive in wanting to micromanage the Office of the Director of Criminal Investigations?
Ayub, according to the Constitution, the power of taking people to court and charging them still is vested in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. It has not changed. The DCI has a role in that process of investigations and then passing on the evidence in the form of a file to the DPP for consideration. So, and this has been affirmed. In fact, just 2 months ago, clearly the court was clear that the role of the DPP still it remains as is in the Constitution, which is to take people to court. The DCI has no role. You remember some other cases where the DCI tried to take people to court? It didn't work because that is not the role of the DCI. And it is incumbent upon the agencies involved actually to work in tandem. Otherwise, if they don't work in tandem, of course, we may even end up having miscarriage of justice because the DCI is not collecting evidence as it is, and the DPP, of course, in his own wisdom, and the officers in his office may not be able to prosecute or will think that this evidence is not good enough and return the file, while the DCI feels like this evidence is good enough. You know, in recent months, perhaps up to 7-8 months, the office of the DPP and the office of the DCI, there have been disconnects. And yet, these two agencies are supposed to work together to ensure justice is served for all Kenyans, irrespective of their status. So, yes, there is a problem, and we need to address how the DPP and the DCI can work together to ensure fair administration of justice.
Let me go to David.
Still remains the role of the DPP to prosecute in court.
That is the Constitution as it enshrines. David, to you, the amendments to the security laws 2014 by the ruling Jubilee Party does give President Uhuru Kenyatta the leeway to appoint the Inspector General of Police without open recruitment. In this case, in your view, does the Office of the President then perhaps subsume the IG, the Director of Criminal Investigations, both in particular way that it undermines the independence and how they need to operate as the Constitution does clearly state?
And that's the whole problem arises, because whenever these laws are made, and particularly on our parliament, that's where they are supposed to make, and in particular, If you remember, you have just said that organizing secretary of common law voters within Exercutive, which have petitioned the parliament, both parliament and senate, to come with law where they will act, make a law to allow the public or all stakeholders to participate in making the new laws. Because if it will be left to similar or smaller classes of politicians, this problem will occur now and then. So it is high time the office of president, whoever will come, will serve his interest or some clique. And that's where the problem lies.
Okay, then how do we solve that problem? I mean, who in this case, in your view, as you mentioned, that being the problem, while that was my question purposely based on that, who do you think then that needs to step in and stop what's happening at the moment? Because there are clear guidelines and laws by the Constitution to properly set the police service to the path of prosperity.
I think also the leaders, they must now think about the country and not the self-gain. Because if, for instance, this law is made and it becomes in parliament, and everybody feels that they must follow laws, they must do what law says, all this problem will not recur. But in particular, if you have seen the political classes, they are always very individuals, and they will never allow other people to come in. And that's the problem comes.
Okay, then there's a leadership in place, David, and you mentioned that the leadership needs to stand up to the occasion and perhaps address the problem. In your view, is the goodwill there from the current leadership?
The problem in the current leadership is, I think the Uhuru top presidency was a mess to the country. And if you have seen now, they are fighting between themselves. This makes everyone else to feel to be the victim of their grudges.
David, I understand your point, and that is, of course, an attribution to the existing political divisions and the fraction in the ruling Jubilee Party. Professor Zron Mugambi, to you, then, there are concerns expressed by activists, and in this case, when you mentioned the Kenya police, they clearly crop up and are adversely mentioned in reports since 2007 come to 2017 when we conducted the elections 3 years ago. And whilst, of course, there are many cases of other brutality met on Kenyans, clearly the police cannot justify, isn't it, the catalogue of police brute they have met on Kenyans in election times. And does this perhaps again amplify the voices more of the needed political reforms, especially after an electoral cycle?
I just wanted to add to what my friend was saying, that despite the fact that there are also welfare issues within the force, which I think the service has been trying to look at over time, what overrides all the other challenges that the force has or the service has is the issue of independence and integrity to be able to administer and work according to the Police Act and according to the Constitution and the laws which apply. And I think the issue of goodwill is also lacking.
Okay.
Do we have political goodwill in the officers concerned to ensure that the police service is working according to how it is supposed to work? The answer is no. And that is why you find that the police, as you have just mentioned,
okay,
is always named in every other report. In fact, you forget that previous reports, even in the 2002, 2007, other reports,
okay,
the Kriegler report, all those other reports, past reports, have always mentioned, when you talk about the Likoni crashes, all the other reports have always mentioned in negative light the police service. And that is why it is important to not only to professionalize it,
okay,
as we have said, but to ensure that it is an independent force which works only according to the Constitution and other acts of law which apply. Once that is done, It will be a neutral force. It will not be used as a tool of oppressing the, those who look like they are against certain people, certain forces, or against the government of the day. Because the police will always remain. They don't only serve the government of the day or specific individuals. They are a service utumishi kwa wote, as their theme is. So they are a service, and they are there at the taxpayers' expense. You pay for the service.
Okay.
I pay for the service. All Kenyans do pay for the service. So they're supposed to be neutral, but they cannot be neutral or independent if the systems which are in place do not give them that independence. Even if you professionalized it, how many times, even if you give them salaries of whatever increase, there will be the same problem.
Okay. Then, Prof, you do expand on the needed political goodwill and the wrapping up in immunity of the police from political pollution. David, to you then, what does it point out to when the government of the day does amend the security laws to target the opposition, to target certain groups of people in the Kenyan society? And does it show the low appetite in the government in the implementation of the 2010 Constitution, or is it a case of police misusing and in targeting people who hold different political opinion?
Thank you for the best question. My observation, and now I must say, like in late Kenya, whatever angle you look at it, people or the leadership, they must realize security or police, they are very popular. They are the implementers of law. And for instance, that's why I've said the leadership of the day has messed up. Is you are intending police to follow the law, but you who have given them law, you are breaking the law. For instance, if His Excellency cannot dialogue with his deputy,
David, we seem to be having a problem with your audio, and we'll be getting back to you as fast as you'll be able to correct that. And the same question will be posed to Professor Hezron Mogambe. Prof, you mentioned about the government of the day, and the importance of police in serving for posterity and not for the government of the day. Then does it mean, according to your statement before I went to David and came back to you, that either the government of the day does not believe in the 2010 Constitution, or is it a case of misusing the Kenya Police Service for political gains and targeting people who hold different political opinions?
I think it is both, and it is more of the second, that it is the use of the police in the wrong way to actually basically misuse them for their own selfish purposes. Will be political, will be intimidation, will be against rights of the others. You know, that is why in the end, the MPs, for example, who were targeted were not charged. Mm-hmm. You see, if they were charged in a court of law, like Senator Malala, if he was charged in a court of law, then we will think about it. But even then, there is a way which is prescribed in the act on how this kind of people, or Kenyans in general, because even senators are Kenyans, should be handled when they are accused of certain particular, things which they have done against the law. So I think, to answer your question, the government of the day is misusing the police in doing things which are actually against the Constitution. And there is no political goodwill in the officers concerned to ensure that the police as a service serve Kenyans fairly, justly, and in accordance with the Constitution. Okay.
Now, Charles, do we still have David? Yes, there we go. David, to you in Iceland. In understanding, and this, of course, surrounds the important aspect of the erosion of the fundamentals that the 2010 Constitution does guarantee. In your view, then, how do we, in the end term, at the end of the tunnel, perhaps be able to understand, and that is the leadership in government at the moment, given the authority by the people, that this is a service that needs to serve the Kenyan people, not to serve a clique or the top echelons in the government at the expense of an authority or an order by the government given in misusing and targeting people who they think are of different opinion?
I think it is high time the Kenyan people start with the police or our security agent. Why am I saying this? You can't staff them on salary, then you expect them to give good results. So I think it is high time the government of the day, they think of our security. If they just give them peanuts, that's a big problem.
Yes, go ahead, David.
I think it is high time the government of the day, they make us proud by recognizing our security agents as part of them. They first look for the salaries, they remunerate them like any other civil servant so that at least they feel part of system. And they will never be used. You can't staff someone, then you send him to the field when already you have downgraded his dignity. He can't make ends meet, and then you expect him to implement law. That's the problem. And I am sure if our government, our police are considered, they can do more, and they will never be used. Everyone, we are here. The police here gets a good salary like anybody else. So whenever they go, they are proud of their salary. They are proud of how the government takes them, and they implement law without favor or fear of intimidation because their salary is enough to cater for their children, and they prevent their job. Unlike in my country, where the implementer of law, they are paid pieces. Not only that, even on teachers. That's why we have said, when they are making the best laws, they must allow all participants, all stakeholders to participate. And in that, everyone will feel they are eating the cake. That's my observation.
Okay, Professor Hezron Mogambe, as we speak on this subject matter, and when we do so, the executive does crop up, and there are at least 200 cases where the government officials have been accused of defying court orders, and that is more than 200. And 6 months is the number of months the Interior PS Karanja Kibisho has been sentenced to serve in prison for contempt of court order. 3 is the number of arrest warrants given against Mr. Kibicho by the courts for contempt in 5 years. 60 is the number of days within which petitions before parliamentary committees must be concluded. MPs have accused the executive of delaying the progress. And generally, this perhaps is the concern that many Kenyans have when you listen to what civil society organizations are saying. And in your view, is it perhaps a rollback on the democratic gains that we made post-1992 and 2010? And does it perhaps bend the country towards anarchy?
You know, Ayub, I've always held this view that the first example we need to get about implementation, not only of the Constitution or the new Constitution, but laws in any country, including Kenya, should come from leadership, because that is how they show leadership. Those will be MPs, they'll be senators, they'll be, you know, all government officials, including the president. All of them should show by example that this is why you should obey the law, follow the Constitution. Mm-hmm. In the absence, Ayub, of that, then you only invite anarchy. Can you imagine a situation where ordinary Kenyans will not be following court orders, will not be obeying the Constitution, will not be following applicable laws anywhere, whether in the national or in the county government or in the villages? It will be anarchy in the entire country. And so, in a country where the leadership itself does not follow the Constitution, does not obey court orders, that is a sure invitation to anarchy. Because once the ordinary citizen sees that they can also subvert, they can also evade, then everybody soon will be following, and the government itself will not be able to keep law and order.
Then, as you mentioned that, Prof, let me finish up on you and then go to David and take his final comments on this. Even as you mentioned that, then, it does clearly create an impression that the laws do not apply to the people at the top, isn't it? And perhaps encourage general law breakage among Kenyans.
That is what I'm saying, that this is, I can only give an example of one of those books I like. It is called Animal Farm. Perhaps you have seen it.
Okay.
That these laws perhaps apply to a certain cadre of people, which is generally to mean the ordinary citizens. But for us, we have seen, it is not only in court orders, we have seen even senators, MPs, people in government actually not obeying simple traffic regulations. Very simple. And so you find that when in a country, in a society where we do not obey, we do not follow the rules which the leaders have helped to put into place, then who will be the custodian of this? Who will show leadership by following this? Because we always, even children in school, I'm a professor in the university,
okay.
I always say that if you do the right thing, then your children will follow doing the right thing, and everybody else will do the right thing. But if it is a parent, it is a professor, it is the leader who is doing the wrong thing, then the wrong examples are passed to the ordinary citizens. And for sure, we will just invite anarchy and disobedience, and we don't know where we'll go after that.
Okay. Now, and David, to you, and this final question, which is general, and there seems to be cases where the executive does not honor the summons by other independent institutions, including Parliament, where even to some extent the House Speaker Justin Muturi did say, when CISs fail to honor summons to appear before committees, just notify my office to report so that I can take action. A court was told that the PS, Karanja Kibesho, told chiefs that the police never to respect the court orders just because the judiciary has refused to assist the ministry with eradication of illegal brews. I mean, generally, it affects the running of the government, isn't it? And what does it portend for Kenya's constitutional democracy?
I think it is being abused. Our constitution is being left by those people who are supposed to take care of it. And in particular, the executive have been using loopholes.
Go ahead.
And it is my understanding that if the executive set good examples, and in particular, the big problem we have in Kenya is that they have refused to harmonize the salaries. And if there is an institution which has been misused, is politician. That's why you find everyone, they want to steal from their institution so that one time they become politician and they made with laws. Until everyone realizes that the Kenya is a government, we need all to participate and make it great. And in particular, harmonizing of the salaries, because this has made everyone else to feel left out.
Okay, David, thank you so much for the expression of that point. And in responding to my question, unfortunately, we are out of time, and as ever, time has beaten us here on the broadcast. Thank you so much, David Kimengere, joining us from Iceland in Europe, and to Professor Hezron Mogambi, commentator on social political developments and lectures at the University of Nairobi. Your times appreciated, and good night. We'll see you on the broadcast, and this doesn't, however, mark the end of the broadcast, with some minutes, of course, to analyze some of the major international headlines. And Americans are 74 days away from the presidential elections in November this year. There we go. Now, the only time this has happened and an approval rating was 41% was that of Jimmy Carter and George H. Bush, and they all lost their re-election bid. Donald Trump is now polling at 41, about 9 points behind Joe Biden, who is the Democrats' nominee and the flag bearer in 2020 elections. Now, the next is now when you compare those who have been seeking re-elections and in such a time, and you look at the highest at the time at one point was President Clinton at 53% and Ronald Reagan at 53%, all of course went to win their re-elections. And in such a time, though not in the 50, President Barack Obama in 2012 against Mitt Romney had polled at 47% alongside President George W. Bush, who was seeking a re-election in 2004 when he, of course, beat and defeated the former American Foreign Secretary John Kerry in the 2004 elections. And we have the picture of the historic picking of the Democrat vice presidential nominee. Here we have Kamala Harris coming up shortly, and this is what we have. Of course, she is the woman who will be assisting Joe Biden if he will be elected the President of the United States of America. Of course, born to immigrant mother from India and an immigrant father from Jamaica, served as state prosecutor in California, of course, and a woman seen as a woman of color in the United States of America, has been tough in advocating for the rights of black Americans. And as that happens, the Democrats rather, have been having the Delegates National Convention, in which the party did express clear concerns about the running of the United States of America by Donald Trump. And what they say was chaos, and America faces isolation, destructive future amid deadly pandemic and the rising climate crisis globally. Some of the issues, of course, that will continuously underpin the elections in the United States of America. On the international level, though, that domestic, you have Trump walking away from the Iran nuclear agreement 2015 that was reached by the Obama administration. Termed it as hoax. He says that the plan will not help Iran shelve its nuclear ambitions. Renegotiation, the European Union says, no, hold on, Mr. Trump, we need to embark on this. Him walking out of the Paris 2015 climate accord, then presided over by the former French President Francois Hollande. And then, of course, calling the African countries asshole, and the wars with China, and of course the pandemic mishandling by Donald Trump. And that will be, of course, the other factor that will externally underpin the American elections. We come to a close in the broadcast. I have to thank my team, and most importantly, the Man United Fans Super Director, Charles Ntere. Teresia, thank you so much for the fantastic videos and the timely playing of those sound bites. KK on the tags, always upbeat and assesses the situation. Dennis, the sound has been fantastic. And Suleiman Wachefa, the gentleman behind this jib, alongside our master control room and the able person there, Sharon Akinyi Nyarsia. On Sunday, though, UEFA Champions League final in Lisbon, the Portuguese capital, and Bayern München will be up against PSG. Looking forward to that. And they beat Barcelona. We'll see you next week on Thursday. Bye-bye.